Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the 2019 drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is award-winning investigative reporter Bob Mackin, publisher of thebreaker.news. Welcome back to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
Bob, so many people were talking about a minority government going into the election, and that's exactly what we got. Is Trudeau going to form some kind of coalition with the NDP, or is he going to just go case by case and hope they support him?
Well, he's already dismissed that at his first news conference after the election. Didn't do one the day after the election like normally happens. He waited until the day after. And even then, the scheduled time got bumped by half an hour. So he wasn't on time for that either. He was very clear. He dismissed that idea that there will be no formal or informal agreement, power sharing of any sort. So that is already off the table. He said he's going to meet the leaders of all the parties, find out what their priorities are, and find ways to work together. We hear this often, of course, when there's very divisive, acrimonious election. That afterwards, the victor always says that. They always say, it was a tough race, and we're going to mend some fences and find out how we can work in a more conciliatory fashion. We hear that all the time. That might last the first day in Parliament until the first question period, but it never really lasts long. Even if there was to be a formal coalition, formal team, or formal agreement of any way, it wouldn't last. It wouldn't, bring about all the unicorns and rainbows that you might think they might talk about right after winning. And of course, he's in a happy mood, a winning mood. He has to keep the Prime Minister's office. It'll be a little bit bumpier in the second term, of course, just because he'll have to pay attention to those numbers, and maybe they'll listen more. Maybe Liberal MPs will listen with one or both ears this time, and maybe they won't put their fingers in their ears. Maybe they'll have to actually listen. But I don't think it's going to turn into a new model of governance. I mean, after all, the Liberals came into power in 2016 promising to do politics differently. They were promising disclosure by default. They were promising a new way of doing things, a better way of doing things, and a modern way of doing things that was going to put away the problems of the past, and they really haven't done so, apart from tweaking it so that on some votes, they're letting the members vote with their conscience or vote with their constituents. They still have many whipped votes, however. And, of course, the Senate was allowed to run free. It doesn't have party discipline anymore. The Liberals there are part of a so-called independent group. They still often hang out with Liberals and vote with Liberals, but there's no strict party whipping in the Senate anymore. But apart from that, it's really going to be much of the same. That you're going to have the Liberals who just won an election under Trudeau to stay in power, and they're going to remind others of that. And I don't think we're going to see the wounds heal pretty quickly, especially when the Conservatives had a lot of nasty things to say about the Liberals, and the Conservatives, I'm sure every time they get a chance in question period, will remind the Liberals of who won the popular vote. Unfortunately for the Conservatives, the popular vote doesn't decide elections in Canada, but popular vote was theirs, and how the Liberals lost more than 1 million votes in 2019 compared to 2015. And then, of course, there's Elizabeth May and the Greens, who was very open and animated with Global TV on election night, and told them in no uncertain terms that it's going to be very difficult for her to mend fences with the NDP after the NDP turned around in the last couple of weeks of the campaign and targeted the Greens. And she says that the Greens were subject to attacks of misinformation from the NDP, and she even said she got hate mail at her campaign in Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands. So, you can say that you want to be a little more kinder and gentler coming in after the election, but I don't think it's going to happen. It's not going to happen at all, and if it does show any signs of it, it'll happen very briefly. But the fact that Trudeau already dismissed forming some kind of alliance, and the fact that he also said in no uncertain terms that, just as he said in the campaign trail, that the Trans Mountain Pipeline is still getting the green light from the federal government. It got the green light, and he's not going to stand in the way of it. He says that Canada needs to find other ways to find other markets for its oil than just the United States, which gets a good deal on it. New markets have to be found in order to get that resource offshore and into the resources of customers overseas, namely China. He didn't mention it at all, but you got to wonder, could increased oil shipments be a way to try to get on China's good side again? That's a question that I'd have.
Now, there's a Facebook group, Wexit, Western separatist kind of thing. They only had a few hundred people who belonged, but now they've gone up over 200,000 since the election. Is Western separatism a real possibility, or at least a movement that would have a cultural and political side to it?
I think it is. It's being mocked online with the hashtag RedNexit, which is kind of funny. But I think it is something that can grow. We're seeing this trend around the world. We saw the leader of the Bloc Québécois mention in his news conference, because someone asked about it, that Quebec might share some allegiance with those in Scotland or Spain's Catalonia region who are also looking for some sort of independence. Of course, Britain is in the throes of separating itself from the rest of Europe, from the European Union. And we're seeing, again, the Bloc Québécois, they won 32 seats. They have more seats than the NDP does. And they're going to be a force in Parliament. Although they didn't campaign like the old hardline Parti Québécois did way back when, the provincial party that campaigned with a very hardline separatist stance. The Bloc Québécois is a little bit kinder and gentler in their outlook, but I think they want eventually the same outcome, which is for Quebec to be its own animal. So we've got Alberta and Saskatchewan. We've got the premiers of Alberta and Saskatchewan writing letters and making public statements saying that they want a better deal from Ottawa, and that they're willing to start to look at other ways if they can't get that deal. Of course, here in British Columbia, it's been suggested that there could be a Cascadia someday. Already we've seen how Premier John Horgan and the governor of Washington have made various policy connections and have had their summits. We've seen the soccer fans going up between Seattle and Vancouver, as well as Portland and Vancouver, waving those Cascadia flags, the ones with the green, white, and blue, and the black coniferous tree. We see that Canada, that British Columbia has a lot more in common with its southern neighbors than it does with its neighbors to the east on the other side of the Rockies. That was confirmed by a recent poll by Mario Canseco and Research Co. That this is a unique part of Canada, and perhaps that kind of sentiment could also unfold here. Of course, the Liberals have a few more seats here in British Columbia. They've got 11 seats, just like the NDP, but they don't have any seats in Alberta, and they have one in Saskatchewan. So those provinces are basically, or maybe they correct me for a second. I believe that they lost their Saskatchewan seat, Ralph Goodale.
Yeah.
So the Liberals do not represent anybody in Saskatchewan or Alberta. It's been talked about sort of a trial balloon that perhaps there could be a senator, someone from the Senate plucked out of the Senate and put into cabinet. That has happened before, so it's not that unusual, but would Trudeau actually pluck someone out of the Senate, someone who represents Saskatchewan or Alberta, to sit in cabinet and be a regional minister of some sort? Now, that remains to be seen, but in this divided Canada, I don't think Trudeau really cares that much about Alberta, Saskatchewan, and I think it may be right for Jason Kenney and Scott Moe to be standing up right now and saying, hey, we want to be seen and heard. Just because we don't have any seats doesn't mean you didn't have people who were voters for your party during the campaign. Doesn't mean that we don't deserve the same as other provinces. So they're doing the right thing for their own citizens at this time. And you've got to also wonder, what about the future of liberal largesse here in British Columbia? Justin Trudeau stays in the Prime Minister's office, doesn't have the majority he wants, but stays in the Prime Minister's office, even with a diminished number of seats here in British Columbia. And how important going forward will it be? Could we see the Liberals, as they became under Trudeau the First and later John Chrétien, basically right off the West, right off British Columbia? It wasn't that important to them because they had to take care of their power base, which is Ontario and Quebec. So I think we're going in a direction now where Quebec is going to start to flex its muscles again, and I think Alberta and Saskatchewan are too, and you never know what might happen here in British Columbia. This is going to be a test for Trudeau. Can he put his diversity message on pause for a little while he goes and tries to fix national unity? Does he really want to? There's several questions along those lines that will be answered in the weeks and months and years to come.
Will Trudeau be vindictive like Stephen Harper was and cancel projects and other things, close federal offices in places like Alberta and Saskatchewan because they didn't vote for him? I'm just looking at the Kitsilano Coast Guard base was in a Liberal riding and shut down, even though it was the busiest Coast Guard base in Canada.
Yeah, that could happen. You never know. Maybe we won't see much in the way of spending announcements in Alberta and Saskatchewan in the next couple of years. Being vindictive could happen. I think we're going to see Trudeau have to do things that he campaigned against, such as cuts. If we had $1 for every time he said cuts, that might have made a big dent in the national debt. Trudeau and Morneau, the finance minister, they can't spend like drunken sailors forever. They'll eventually have to realize that they're going to have a little bit of austerity. So watch for that day when it comes when they actually have to cut, and they'll be reminded of what they said on the campaign trail. And maybe they'll have to cut in Alberta or Saskatchewan. Again, I think we're going to see Justin Trudeau very much do what has happened in previous times, which is play to the base, which is focus on those power centers in Ontario and Quebec.
What's the future for Andrew Scheer? Everybody thought, with all the mistakes that the Liberals had made, scandals and so on, blackface, why wasn't he more effective in the election? Is Andrew Scheer unelectable as Prime Minister?
This was his election to win, but lost it. Although he got another 1 million votes in the popular vote than the Trudeau Liberals did. Was this all on Andrew Scheer's shoulders? So as leader, he'll have to accept the blame. But was he listening too much to his campaign team headed by Hamish Marshall? I think that this campaign had some elements of what we saw here in 2013 in British Columbia when it was the NDP under Adrian Dix running against Christy Clark. Well, the Adrian Dix NDP was on fire in question period. They're the kings of question period, kings and queens of question period, always keeping the Liberals on their toes, on their heels, sometimes on their butts. This was quite something. And then, of course, it was like flicking a switch. Suddenly, when the writ was dropped in 2013, we saw a different Adrian Dix and the NDP. They were running a positive campaign that they later on realized, hey, wait a second, we got to have some attack ads here. We're running out of time, and the polls aren't looking good. That wasn't quite the same as Scheer and the Conservatives, but they did focus on a positive message. They did have some attack ads, but we didn't see much of them. We saw some of them online, but we saw mainly was a positive campaign with the nice upbeat music and the visuals and saying it's time for you to get ahead. And he was also always talking on the campaign trail about wanting to put a little more money in your pocket. You wanted everyone to have a little more money in their pocket, which is a nice sentiment. But when it comes to an election like this, you've got to be on the attack. You've got to continue to prosecute the government. That's what the opposition's job is, and just because they're not in the opposition benches because Parliament's closed for the election doesn't mean they should stop being the opposition. And as much as he did have his moments, like in the debate where he called Justin Trudeau a fraud and a fake, and called him a corrupt, well, he should have sustained that message throughout the campaign. And because what happened was the Liberals turned around and they defined Andrew Scheer. Instead of letting Andrew Scheer define Justin Trudeau, he didn't do a good enough job of that. The Liberals turned around and did it one better on Andrew Scheer, basically dragging up old speeches he made in the House of Commons from a decade and a half ago about some of his social conservative views on abortion and same-sex marriage. They turned around and questioned his dual citizenship. They questioned his short career as an insurance broker, although not fully qualified to be an insurance broker. They did a lot to define Andrew Scheer, especially after the blackface came as a moment that defined Justin Trudeau as being this entitled party animal who had no respect for those who are of different colors, and decided to blackface himself. So I think Andrew Scheer's campaign was the wrong campaign. He'll have a leadership review at the next Conservative convention. Between now and then, what will happen? Will there be Conservatives in the caucus or outside of caucus who will stand up and say, hey, I'm going to explore leadership campaign. We should have a leadership convention. Andrew Scheer could always run again for the leadership too. If there is a leadership convention, should he not pass his review, or he could just call it a day. But I think this was kind of a campaign where he failed to do what Conservatives had done before, which is gain a foothold in urban centers. They don't have any MPs in Vancouver, for instance. They're strong in the Valley, and they've got a foothold in Surrey, and they've got two in Richmond now. That was one of the positive moments, was Kenny Chiu defeating Joe Pescasolido. Joe Pescasolido, who had so many scandals stemming from business from his law firm, his immigration and real estate law firm. And of course, the most recent scandal was one that I uncovered in the Breaker.News, exclusive video of a pro-China communist protester actually working in the campaign office of Joe Pescasolido on the day it opened. So you do have a few inroads there, but the Conservatives haven't been able to have a candidate who can bridge the rural with the urban, someone who can convince people in Vancouver that that's the right way to go. You had instead the mayor of Vancouver, who comes from the NDP federally, saying that Andrew Scheer would have been dangerous for Canada and dangerous for Vancouver. He didn't need to do that, of course, because there was no danger of a Conservative being elected in any of the ridings within the city of Vancouver's limits. But that message resonated around Metro Vancouver and British Columbia, and possibly helps the Liberals keep some votes and keep people from voting Conservative. So I think Andrew Scheer and the Conservative Party need to look at the gains that they had and the points they were able to score. This was a positive campaign in that aspect. Only 4 years after Harper's debacle, disaster, his defeat. So they have moved themselves up, picked themselves up and dusted themselves off. And the campaign, the mood around the campaign also from a media standpoint was better than it was around Harper. I was able to ask Andrew Scheer some questions. Last time around, I wasn't, because they stuck to a 5-question limit at most campaign events, and often they had campaign people, party supporters standing behind Harper and around us in the media, who were pinned in a spot in any hall where there was a Harper event. And of course, before Harper was able to answer, we got a lot of jeers and boos from supporters. This time around, it was more businesslike, more respectful manner. Of course, Andrew Scheer wasn't running from a position of being the Prime Minister like Stephen Harper was. He was running from a position of getting the party back into power. But it was a welcome environment, different from the way it was 4 years ago, when media was really not very well welcomed at all at Conservative events.
Of course, Scheer didn't answer the questions that were asked of him about the smear campaign against the People's Party of Canada.
Yeah, that was one that came so late in the campaign that we don't know exactly how much damage it did, but there still are questions, and the People's Party of Canada has complained to Elections Canada, and this could have legs. I mean, this could have cost them a seat, Maxime Bernier's seat, but the apparent hiring of Warren Kinsella to run a social media campaign, a secret social media campaign against the People's Party of Canada, calling them racist, was over the line. I looked at the gallery of candidates for the People's Party of Canada, and that actually was a party that was rather diverse. A lot of people who were not named Smith or Taylor, a lot of people who come from all around the world. They were able to successfully recruit a diverse set of candidates. Now, having said that, there were a few bad apples along the way who were people that did not deserve to be in Parliament because of the views they held. But I think that Maxime Bernier got this tag against him, which in many ways was unfair. And Warren Kinsella, who has written books about and campaigned against people who are real racists, was leading this campaign. That again, the Andrew Scheer Conservatives weren't exactly answering all the questions about it, and Warren Kinsella himself wasn't answering all the questions about it. He still maintains a license to be a lawyer in Ontario, and he said that that's why he wouldn't be answering all the questions. This is something that again, perhaps the Liberal government, although I'm not holding my breath, could do something to fix. They didn't do anything to fix last time, but our governments say that they're concerned about what's on social media. Well, why aren't they concerned enough to push the social media companies to eliminate anonymous accounts? Shouldn't everyone on social media be on social media with their real name and their real face? If they're going to be publishing allegations about other people, well, they should be standing up, standing behind it, and standing for the consequences if that does happen. So this didn't need to happen. And, of course, there was a lot of anonymous tweeting going on the other side of the equation, too. And you never know what else we might find in the weeks and months to come once we know more about who was campaigning where and what during this election. But definitely that didn't look good on the Conservatives. I think they didn't need to do that. There was some school of thought that the People's Party of Canada was going to attract enough people not fit for the Conservatives that the Conservatives would be happy to see them go. That there'd be fewer bad headlines about poorly behaved candidates because they'd be leaving to go to another party. That didn't always ring true, but there were a few that were questionable. And there were a few Conservatives that had joined the party that actually went back to the Conservatives because they weren't happy with the direction that the People's Party was taking earlier this year. So we'll see what Elections Canada and the Commissioner of Canada Elections does with this investigation.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
Cypress Development Corp is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, is the BC Money Laundering Inquiry going to go into action anytime soon?
Yes, it already is in action. It had a soft launch on Friday of last week at the Federal Court of Canada, where Justice Austin Cullen, who's presiding over the commission, read his opening statement, and then he heard from some lawyers for some people who want to be participants. The lawyers for these people want to have lawyers at the inquiry so that they can cross-examine witnesses as well as testify themselves. There was lawyers there for Jim Lightbody, the CEO of BC Lottery Corporation, Brad Damaris, who is Vice President of Casinos and Security for BC Lottery Corporation, and also a lawyer there for Fred Pinnock, the former RCMP officer who ran the anti-gambling task force during the later years of the Campbell years in government, and that's the one that Rich Coleman famously shut down, where Fred Pinnock turned into a whistleblower who has talked about that experience and talked about how poorly the government and BCLC and Gaming Policy Enforcement Branch were actually dealing with crime at casinos. So Justice Cullen said he would reserve his decision from that day and would have more to say perhaps by the end of this week or starting next week. But this week starts a 5-city tour. So from this week until middle of November, the Money Laundering Public Inquiry is stopping in 5 cities. They're going from Vancouver to Victoria to Prince George to Richmond and also in the Okanagan. And they'll be making presentations. They'll be giving time for people to speak, to make presentations to these public meetings, where the Commission Counsel, Brock Martland, as well as Justice Cullen, will be there to listen, and perhaps some of the people that do make these presentations at these public meetings will then themselves be called in to testify, or will be asked to provide more information so as to help the people that are working on the inquiry so they can get the best result possible. It's important that they do this kind of outreach to the public so the public knows what this is all about, but also gives a chance for the public to come forward. There could be whistleblowers out there that we've never heard before, and people that would not have complained before had it not been for this outlet for them to actually go and meet the people that are involved with the commission. It's also important from a time standpoint because this is going to be a very thorough inquiry. The actual hearings aren't supposed to start until spring, and they are going to go through next fall. There's supposed to be a first interim report November of next year, and this is supposed to all be wrapped up by May 2021, before the fall 2021 provincial election. It's an ambitious timeline, but they're going to find out pretty soon how ambitious they need to be. They are looking at this avenue. They're looking at doing composite reports along the way, trying to find ways, because they know that there's going to be more people to want to testify than time will permit, and that if they look at previous public inquiries, like the Charbonneau Commission inquiry in Quebec, these are multi-year processes, and of course, the NDP would love to have enough out there before the next election, but this could be such that it could have to go beyond the next election. But Brock Martland said, they do have to limit it, because this is the kind of thing where they could spend a whole decade on. It's that deep, that important, and that trailblazing too. This is going to be something that will be watched around North America and perhaps around the world, wherever there is gambling going on.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after the break.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, what's the latest on the college admission scandal?
Well, David Sadu doesn't have new charges, but he's there on the third superseding indictment with a whole bunch of other people who were previously charged who have more charges against them. the prosecutors are bringing more charges against defendants, and they're also bringing out more information against defendants. They're trying to hurry this process along. Well over 50 people have been charged, and almost half of those have either pleaded guilty in court already or have already agreed to plea in court at a later date. And the new superseding indictment that came out on October 22nd has some damaging new information about David Sidhu's sons. There's even one allegation made by the prosecutors in this document that his son Jordan falsely claimed in an October 2013 essay which accompanied his application to universities that he'd been held up by gunpoint by gang members in Los Angeles, and that he had actually went to volunteer for a charity to spread the anti-gang violence news around Los Angeles. This is quite damaging because there's words in there that come from email that the prosecutors have about David Sidhu talking with Rick Singer, who's the ringleader in the whole college admission scandal, about making changes in the draft of the essay, suggesting that maybe take out the lessen the interaction with gangs and guns. Sidhu called it scary stuff. So they toned it down. But the essay did go out to the universities without reference to guns, was submitted as part of the application to multiple universities. So not only do you have the allegation that the father of the two Sidhu boys paid about $200,000 for someone else to write their exams so they could get into universities in the United States, you had one of them saying in order to get into that university in the United States that he had a personal experience and he was trying to help others not have that personal experience, and that personal experience being the victim of a crime, the victim of a violent crime, and saying that he was also helping out a charity to spread the anti-gang violence word around. So this is going to place more pressure on David Sidhu. His lawyer, however, is pretty clear that David Sidhu is preparing for trial, and he's still not guilty. And his quote, David Chesnoff's quote, is that, quote, "These are mere allegations from the mouths of admitted fraudsters. Mr. Sidhu looks forward to his day in court." Other allegations within this are interesting too, that apparently there was a scheme to have Mark Riddell, the professional test taker hired by Rick Singer, write another one for David Sidhu, and it was going to get paid $100,000 for another test to be written for one of Sidhu's sons. And there's also allegations in here that Mark Riddell, the professional test taker, actually wired money through Western Union to someone in China to buy fraudulent driver's licenses so he could pose as Dylan Sidhu for one of the tests. That's also rather damaging that they were looking at that. The other major test that they were looking at doing that was going to cost another $100,000 to David Sidhu, that went awry. Those plans went awry because apparently the place where they were looking at having Mark Riddell write the exam was going to take fingerprints. So somewhere one of these test writing venues or companies did have extra controls, and those extra controls included comparing fingerprints. But evidently not all places had that because Mark Riddell was able to exact this scheme on behalf of Rick Singer. And also the other interesting part is that this new indictment includes allegations from the accountant of the Key World Foundation, which is the bogus charity that Rick Singer ran. This fellow's name is Stephen Macera. He has pleaded guilty to his role in this whole case and has agreed to help the prosecutors. And basically, they're sending a message to David Sidhu in this one section that they've got all these three people, the three key people in this whole scheme, and they're all on side and all willing to testify against him, and they have some more new allegations, and they would be implying to David Sidhu through this that there's probably more to come. And they're hoping that he would plead guilty to not have him take this to court and not have more allegations come out that would harm his character. This is all the game that's played in U.S. courts especially. It's a serious game because the courts are not set up to have trials on every single lawsuit or every single criminal case. The courts would collapse under the weight of all those cases. U.S. prosecutors rely on putting forward a good, strong case, so strong that it does cause people in positions like David Sadu is in now to decide to plead guilty so that there is no trial, so that they can go on to the next defendant. But for now, David Sadu is maintaining his innocence, and his lawyer says he's looking forward to his day in court, and that the new allegations that are out there are just the allegations from the mouths of admitted fraudsters. So it's a he said situation for now, and it's the character of David Sadu against the character of Rick Singer and others for now.
Do you think this fraudulent test writing to get into college has been going on longer and could be deeper than what this particular inquiry is finding?
It could be the tip of the iceberg, and we won't know how far it goes until we get further into perhaps more evidence coming out through indictments and other court documents, as well as trials itself, and maybe regulatory bodies in the United States, maybe universities themselves will get together and do some investigations too, because not only do we have to look at the parents that are involved in these schemes that are going through court, but what about the universities? Where are their controls when it comes to actually accepting these documents, accepting these applications, as well as these private companies that run the tests? I think this is a serious matter that does deserve extra investigation. I'm trying to find out more about the whole structure of the industry here in British Columbia, and would be glad to hear from anyone out there who might have some information to give me. But as long as you got a lot of people with a lot of money thinking they can use their money to open doors in this way, you'll have people who are there at the doors, tempted to open the doors for them. So this could be the tip of the iceberg, and we'll see how far it goes.
Bob, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been Bob Mackin, an award-winning investigative reporter and publisher of thebreaker.news, his website, thebreaker.ca. If you have any questions for Bob or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.